All right, back here at the NFL Scouting Combine, and as promised, one of the main voices, one of the main insiders in the business over at the NFL Network, Tom Pelissero, joins us
How
right
do I
now.
follow that?
I mean, Tom, come on now.
I got
Look
more
at you.
questions for that guy. I want to know, man. He was delivering those downward punches there like he'd been practicing for that moment.
That is listener Michael Lasso. He is the county clerk out in Las Vegas involved in that incident, and he was just named Las Vegas Citizen of the Month for
Hey, how
basically
about
being
that?
a hero.
That's awesome.
Jet
Really
fans
cool.
are heroes, Tom.
How about that? Yeah, I love it.
Well, I appreciate you doing this, obviously. A lot to talk about with the Jets. I mean, I got to start with this Mecole Hardman situation. SNY is reporting that the Jets believe that he leaked game plans for not just that Eagles game that Sauce Gardner implied on Twitter, but also the Chiefs game as well. What are you hearing in regards to that?
I mean, I would say if the game plan was leaked for the Eagles game, they should have leaked all the game plans the entire season because it worked out pretty well. And Zach Wilson played one of his best games. I have not heard that. Can't say I've spent a great deal of time today digging into that situation. It would not be the first time that teams have attempted to, players from player to player, I'm sure, have tried to get some type of an advantage. But, these are also things that like the league worries about at a bigger level. And I'm not saying this is connected, but when you talk about the idea of inside information that can be used in gambling and other things, a lot of the things that spread are player to player. And so this would be an example of something that I think the league potentially would take an interest in, at least review the situation, find out exactly what happened. But to this point, I'm not aware that they're doing that.
If it is true, I mean, these are, as you allude to, very serious allegations. I wonder if Mecole Hardman is going to have a tough time getting another job if teams feel like, hey, if you get beat out by an undrafted rookie wide receiver again, or we're limiting your playing time, or he has an incident with a coach, can we trust you to not leak our game plan to the opponent we're playing?
Well, and again, if evidence were to come out that actually happened, that's a lot different than one team believing that potentially happened here. I mean, Mecole played pretty good in that, in the Super Bowl there. I would think that after his Jets experience, he probably would prefer just to remain with the Chiefs moving forward here. We'll see how all that stuff shakes out, but it's definitely questions that people are going to ask.
Yeah, and I guess the other, aspect of what he said on the Pivot podcast was that he said to Brent Veach, the GM of the team, and Patrick Mahomes, hey, come get me, which is obviously tampering, to which we have the clip here. Joe Douglas, the Jets general manager, yesterday, Tom, was asked about what Mecole said, and these were the comments that kind of raised some eyebrows.
Look, I'll just say those are comments that definitely resonated with us.
You think the Jets will ask the NFL to look into it?
The NFL usually looks into these things anyway. If there's anything that resembles tampering, which is a big priority for the NFL, usually it doesn't take the team filing something. It usually is just something that the league takes upon themselves. I mean, the last significant tampering issue involved a coach, and it was Jonathan Gannon getting the Cardinals job, which turned out Monty Ossenfort had called him at a time that there were no interviews allowed. They ended up basically reaching a settlement where the Eagles got a draft pick out of the situation. This is something, fairly unique. If Mecole Hardman called Andy Reid and Brett Veach, he's allowed to do that. They're not allowed to call him and say, hey, you should come play here. He can call whoever he wants. Players can't tamper. Only teams can tamper. So again, if there's anything there, the league has a million ways to get to the bottom of it. We'll see if anything comes of that.
Here's what I think should happen. Now, I might be a little biased, but I think it's a fair compromise.
Jets should get the Lombardi.
Well, Zach Wilson for Patrick Mahomes straight up.
I mean, you could try anything. You can make any call.
You don't think Goodell will be on board with that? He grew up a Jets fan. He's from New York.
He'd be all about it.
Yeah,
I don't know that various other people are really going to be big fans of that.
Let me ask you about the Jets, just kind of state of the franchise. Obviously, this year, unmitigated disaster. 4 plays in, everything changes with Aaron. How are the Jets viewed from the people you talk to around the NFL, agents, executives, other coaches? Because there's a lot on the line for this regime. Robert Saleh, Joe Douglas, seemingly based on Woody Johnson's comments, they got to win next year. Otherwise, they're not going to be here in their roles a year from now if they don't.
Well, I think that's the perception, which is 2024. You hate to say anything's make or break, but this is as close as it gets for a lot of people in that organization, for Aaron Rodgers as well. 2023, everything was built around Aaron. The offense that they built was completely geared to his skill set and being able to control things at the line of scrimmage. 4 snaps in, all of a sudden you're taking Zach Wilson, who the idea with Zach was he would sit and learn for a year or two and not have to play. You immediately put him in there, and they had to kind of spoon feed the offense as they went along because it's just not possible to put all the checks and all the institutional knowledge on a guy who hasn't played in that system before versus Aaron, who's really been building this system since he became the Packers starter back in 2008. So I think that it's difficult to judge exactly what the Jets are. I think that naturally there's going to be, I think that there's, plenty of questions just about like, how could they not generate any level of offense? How could they have those long no touchdown droughts? How is there not obviously a better backup quarterback plan? Well, the backup quarterback thing I think is always a bit of a red herring. I certainly get the frustration when, you're literally starting Tim Boyle one day and cutting him the next day. But, for Zach and for the Jets, the thinking when they put Zach Wilson in the lineup was, if we then go out and we sign Joe Flacco or we sign Carson Wentz, everyone in the stadium is going to be chanting for that guy the moment Zach throws an incompletion. So they tried to put their weight behind Zach. And if you look at his first, let's call it 6 games, he played some pretty good football. I mean, he really did. They win the game in the opener, which wasn't really, an offensive driven game, but he played well against the Chiefs. He played well against the Eagles. Then things kind of got sideways. He gets benched, and then, all bets were off after that. But the point is, the reason they didn't go out and sign a veteran backup afterwards, one, Aaron is not a guy in his career who's missed a ton of time. He's had a few injuries along the way. But when you pay a quarterback like that and you trade for him, you're basically already admitting that if this guy goes down, we're probably in deep trouble. We're probably not coming back from this. So you don't want to put too much into it. And also, you got Zach Wilson, who you still believe there's something there. He's just never been able to be a consistent player. You drafted him number 2 overall. You want to go out and sign another veteran on top of that? They were trying to strike that balance. And really, the first 6 games, Zach Wilson played pretty good, serviceable football.
It helped that Bryce Hall was going crazy. AVT wasn't hurt
no
yet.
question, but when he was called upon, he didn't make the big mistakes. When he had to make some big throws, when they kind of took the reins off a little bit, he played well, but it wasn't able to be consistent. And that's been the story of Zach Wilson's career so far. I totally get where they came from on that, but back to the original question, yeah, the national perception is just they better win. And I think that, to your point, Woody Johnson has already made that abundantly clear. But then on top of it, it's, the defense was not, maybe as dominant as you were expecting. It's still a really good defense.
Top
Jeff
3 in
Holbrook
DVOA.
does a great job. But you were basically going to have to win with defense, and you didn't entirely do that. Cleveland won a lot of games, in part because that defense did come up big every single week. Again, they're a really good defense, so you got that. You're not expecting Aaron Rodgers has to come out and throw for 50 touchdowns this season, but he does need to be on the field. He can't play 4 snaps again. And that's what the entire season's going to turn on.
A couple questions following off what you said. Joe Douglas said something yesterday that I don't think anyone's that surprised, but he did say that Zach Wilson's agent has permission to seek a trade. What's the market for Zach Wilson look like?
I mean, I would not think it's a huge market. He's making, I think, 5.5 fully guaranteed
Correct.
this year. You've got the option. There's no way anybody's picking up the option, as part of a trade. Never say never in the league, but I'd probably say never on that one. And then, on top of that, you're trying to figure out what's been going on with the guy. It's a big evaluation, not just of his play, but him as a guy, just like it was coming out in the draft. On the flip side of that, the draft was recent enough that there are going to be teams that had really, really high grades. I mean, there were many coaches I talked to in particular who thought his tape, Zach Wilson's tape coming out, was better than Trevor Lawrence's, just in terms of the wow plays that he was able to make. Trey Lance started, I don't know if they're probably fewer games than Zach Wilson, but he still started a bunch of games and got beat out by the last pick in the draft. And they still got a 4 for him. We're a year later with Zach, so you have 1 fewer year of team control.
There's also more tape on him not being very good, whereas Trey Lance was hurt, kind of like a mystery. Oh, we don't know.
Right, there's some of that, but also the team control thing is big.
Sure.
When Trey got traded, he had 2 years left at the low number. With Zach, he's got 1 year left, $5.5 million fully guaranteed. Depending how much of any of that money the Jets would be willing to eat, we'll see. I mean, Joe's pulled off plenty of value trades before that people didn't see coming, but I mean, it strikes me as probably a pick flop type of situation, not much more.
Are you hearing anything in regards to which backups the Jets are going to pursue for this offseason? Obviously, Woody Johnson came out. He had the quote, "We need a backup quarterback." We did not have one last year. He said that at NFL Honors. Who's the guy they're targeting this offseason?
The tough part of projecting the backup quarterback jobs, especially in a year like this, is there's a bunch of those borderline guys who might be starters, compete to start, high-end backup ones, and they all want to see, can I go start someplace?
Right.
In most cases. There's some guys who I think don't always want to play and they enjoy the backup. But a lot of those guys want to see, is there a spot out there for me? You got Kirk Cousins, you've got Baker Mayfield, you've got, probably draw a line after that, and then you've got Tannehill and you've got Minshew, who are guys who have started a lot of games, but are they walk in the door starters at this stage in their career? Probably not, but like you've seen, you can have a playoff team with Gardner Minshew at quarterback.
If the Jets had him this past year, I think you could argue they go from 7-10 to possibly 10-7. That might have been in the playoffs.
Right. Then you also got the Justin Fields situation, and you got Russell Wilson. And despite what anybody's going to say, I do not see Russell Wilson being a backup to Aaron Rodgers next season, even at the minimum. Because again, those are guys who are going to want to compete. So if you're the Jets, do you wait on one of those guys and see who ends up with he doesn't have a chair and then try to sign that guy? Or do you go right away and go try to sign Sam Darnold? Not Sam Darnold. Geez, I've done a lot of interviews today. I forgot what team I was talking about. Do you go out and you try to bring back Flacco, or you make a move to like get Jacoby Brissett, somebody like that? Or do you wait and you might get somebody better at roughly the same money? The backup quarterback market, you got $9 million guys and you got vet minimum guys. I think the Jets will spend money on the position, if for no other reason than to show we're spending money on the position. But in terms of who that's going to be, I don't have a totally clear picture of that right now.
How about Bryce Huff's market? What are you hearing in regards to how much money he could get paid?
No, he'll have a market. I'm pretty confident in that because the Jets were getting calls on him to trade for him last year in camp, and that was before he broke out. They kind of saw him in camp and realized how good he was playing, which is why they didn't ultimately do it. They got calls again at the trade deadline. They wouldn't do it. Some of those same teams are going to be in the market here. Bryce Huff will probably be one of those guys that people who didn't watch a lot of the Jets last year because they're not fans of the Jets, and I don't know why anybody who wasn't a fan of the Jets would have been watching the Jets at the end of the season.
We as Jet fans didn't even want to watch the Jets.
Bryce Huff as a double-digit sack guy who's still young. There's not many of those dudes out there. The number will remain to be seen, but if you told me that Bryce Huff's getting $15 million a year, I wouldn't be shocked at all.
If that is his market, could the Jets make that work? I mean, they have cap flexibility. Carl Lawson's deal is up.
But they also, they kind of had an extra, in past years. And obviously, Carl Lawson's not going to be a part of that thing going forward. But you've got, some of the other players where, you've got Jermaine Johnson. You'd like to see him playing, more snaps as you go on. I think that they want to keep Bryce Huff. It's just a matter of, at what number. And does that make sense for Bryce Huff? I wouldn't think he's taking, it's his first big deal. I don't think he's taken a major haircut to stay in New York. I would anticipate that they're in that market, but yeah, the more money, the higher the market goes, the harder it is to retain them.
Anything else you're hearing about the Jets before we wrap up here, Tom? I mean, you're as plugged in as anyone.
Listen, I think that offensive line is going to be a huge priority. It has to be. And then I think wide receiver. They know that they need, one more. They spent a bunch of money last year on Allen Lazard. He's got the relationship with Rodgers. He was a healthy scratch during the season last year. Maybe with Aaron back, it's a completely different situation. Lazard goes back to being that tough dude who's digging out the safety and blocking downfield, doing all those little things that, as much as a pass catcher, that's what they really valued, and that was not a strength for him or that offense last year. I would think that, and they spent on Mecole and tried to bring him in, so they wanted a vertical speed threat. Randall Cobb, they brought a bunch of receivers. I think that somewhere in free agency, they're probably looking for a receiver. Might do it in the draft too. You're probably drafting an offensive lineman. To me, if I were the GM, and thank God I'm not, because Joe Douglas he's a lot better than I am at this stuff. But I would probably rather in this draft make sure I draft an offensive tackle, maybe sign a wide receiver, because the offensive line prices, especially in the first wave of free agency, are always off the charts.
Tom, thank you so much for coming on the show, and let me know if you hear anything about that Zach Wilson for Patrick Mahomes trade, because Mecole Hardman, he might be a rat, and something has to be done about it.
Well, listen, Mecole, whatever happened there, man, it could not have worked out better for him on big stage in Vegas.